Hey, sports fans, this is Robert with WTP Sports Dudes, here to talk a little bit of Longhorn news. So, tomorrow, Texas will have their second scrimmage. These are the things I would like to see come out of tomorrow's scrimmage. First off, I want to see if Texas has a solid two deep at every position in this scrimmage. Do they have two players at each position that they can place in their circle of trust that they know can get the job done so that guys can be rested in that fourth quarter when the game is on the line and it's crunch time? Can they continue to make plays? Because as it was several years ago, when Steve Sarkisian first got to Texas, they did not have a two deep or three deep. And in the fourth quarter, teams took Texas out into the deep and drowned them after Texas was up 17 and 14 points going into the second half. Those teams were able to come back and beat Texas by a score or two. But I think this year is going to be totally different from several years ago. I think Texas is going to have a solid two deep at every position, and I want to see if that is the case in tomorrow's scrimmage. Also, I want to see how well they're going to use that third running back, which is Jarrett Gibson. Is he going to get some valuable reps in this scrimmage so we can see if he's up to speed and able to get us 10 to 15 plays a game in some of those games that we're going to need a third running back? Is he going to be able to do that for us? Another thing I want to see is there going to be someone in that wide receiver room out of those six guys that I talked about in the video yesterday and in earlier videos that I've posted? Are there going to be any wide receivers who are going to step up and take one of those number one spots? Every team needs a number one receiver. It's a must that you have a guy that your quarterback knows this is the guy I can go to in crunch time and he's going to make a play for me. Every team needs that number one guy. And if you follow football the way I follow football, you know that you want your team to have a number one receiver, a guy that connects with his quarterback everywhere on that field. He knows that he can get that ball and make plays for the team. So I'm anxious to see if somebody is going to step up out of that group of six receivers that we know are in that circle of trust. Which one of them is going to step up and be that Xavier Worthy or that A.D. Mitchell for Texas? Also, what I want to see is how are the defensive ends going to get their rotation set? We have a bunch of young guys who are very quick coming off the edge. I want to see where they're going to be positioned at, whether they're going to be on the right or the left, or if they're going to be backing up Ethan Burke or Baron Sorrell. I want to see where they're going to be placed at so that I know that in certain situations in the game, who could possibly be out there on the field to help us get pressure on the quarterback and get the quarterback on the ground. That's been one of the major issues for Texas the past two seasons. They've gotten better at it, but they've always been able to get pressure on the quarterback, but they haven't been able to get the guy on the ground. That's key this year for this Texas defense. And if they can get this quarterback on the ground, they will be in good shape to win a lot of games because that's been their Achilles heel the past few seasons is getting pressure but not getting the quarterback on the ground. You got to get some sacks. Got to get sacks. Another thing I want to see is who will be the two deep at the two cornerback positions. I know that we are solid with Malik Muhammad and solid with Gavin Holmes, but who else is going to step up in there? Will we move uh, Jalen Gilbo to a corner or Jade Barron to a corner? Now, both of those guys are working at the star position, which means they're guarding the slot receiver. You got to have a solid guy who can guard the slot receiver because the slot receiver is usually that guy that can go either direction on a route and can get open the fastest because he's the closest to the quarterback, especially with those quick slants and those quick out routes whenever you run that cornerback off. So I'm anxious to see what our two deep is going to look like at the cornerback position. That's really a position of concern for me at this point because I really don't know if any of those young guys are ready to take on that responsibility after we lost Terrence Brooks in the transfer portal. So I'm not sure what we're going to look like at that position. Another position I want to see what it's going to look like if Mr. Blackwell isn't ready, Maurice Blackwell isn't ready to go game one. I know he suffered a injury, but I haven't gotten a report on how well he's doing at this point. But if he's not able to go, who is going to be that other linebacker that's going to come in and give those guys, Anthony Hill and David Benda, a breather during the games so that those guys can be fresh in the fourth quarter? I know Leona LaFau was going to be one of them, but remember, you got two linebackers out there, so you got to have another guy that can come and be just as talented and just as successful out there as your starters. So I'm anxious to see who's going to step up in that role. Will it be a Darian Gillette or a Ty Anthony Smith, one of those guys? I also want to see what the rotation is going to look like at the safety position. We got a lot of depth at the safety position with some guys who are very fast and Derek Williams being very long with long arms and good size and height. But I'm anxious to see if Michael Taft, who was a walk on, I want to see how much reps he gets because he's probably going to be the most consistent guy back there that's going to be where he needs to be every play. He just doesn't have all those other skills that Andrew Makuba and Derek Williams have. He doesn't have the speed and all the athleticism that those guys have. But he's one of those guys who is going to be in the right place at the right time. He's going to know his coverages. He's going to know how to get guys lined up and in the right positions and what to look for before the play starts. So I'm anxious to see how much run he's going to get and who is going to be that fourth guy out there in that rotation when you got Andrew Makuba and Derek Williams. Who's going to come in with Taft if Taft's not already out there in place of Andrew Makuba or Derek Williams? Who's going to be that fourth guy coming out there? Because we lost a lot in the transfer portal. Guys just decided they weren't going to be able to get enough run with this Texas secondary, so a lot of guys decided to go other places. Also, I want to see what the two deep is going to look like on our offensive line. We know we got solid starters across the board, but I'm anxious to see if some of those guys who have been in the system for 2 years, how well they are going to do. Because if you remember, 2 years ago, um, we had 7 linemen that we got in the in the in the recruiting that year. We got 7 offensive guys, and right now, um, 3 of them are starters. You know, you got Kelvin Banks who started from day one. This is to be his 3rd year starting, and he's probably going to be a top 10 NFL pick. He's definitely going to be a first rounder. And then you got DJ Campbell at that right guard position, and then you got Cam Williams at that right tackle position. So those three guys came in 2 years ago. This will be their third year, and that year that we had those seven offensive linemen. So I'm excited to see who's going to step up and fill those roles um, at those other positions for that two deep, so that we can make sure that those guys are rested in that fourth quarter when we decide we're going to run it down people's throat and milk that clock like we did in that Alabama game last year. There was a couple of games where we tried to do that against TCU and Kansas State, and just wasn't fortunate. Even though we won those games, we weren't able to close those games out at that 4 minute mark where we should have been able to run the clock out on those guys and beat them by double digits. But since we weren't able to do that, we let those guys stay around, and they made them games really close and interesting. But this year, we got to be able to have our linemen with enough energy in that fourth quarter that they can just maul guys, and we can go ahead and milk that clock, get that team to use all their timeouts so that we can go ahead and end that game kneeling down in the kneeling position with the quarterback so we can go ahead and get off that field. So those are the things that I'm excited to see in this second scrimmage, because after the second scrimmage, we're going to go and start install for our first up and coming game against Colorado State, and then we'll also be working on what we're going to do for the Michigans and the Georgias of the world, so that we can have those kind of things in place. So once it comes time to play those teams that week, we can go ahead and reiterate those things that we already talked about during this fall camp. So that's all I have on my Longhorns. Thank you again for tuning in. Thank you for watching all of our videos and supporting us. Please continue to subscribe. Tell your friends to subscribe. Share our videos. Hit the like button. Hit the bell so that you can get notifications anytime we do a new video. I want to thank you all for your support. We love you and we thank you. Hook 'em.